Ever since the last video I made, I've been kind of dabbling into the Hoover Dam and all the occult symbolism surrounding it. I guess you can't do that without going to visit Jonathan Kleck's YouTube channel. Very fascinating. I don't say anything about the guy, but you gotta admit, it's pretty deep. And he shows how the Hoover Dam, it's basically a replica of the birthing canal. And the names and all that stuff already before this 1FC Koln goat logo came on the scene. And this is part of a ritual, as everything they do at the Hoover Dam is a ritual, it seems. All the dates, when it started being built in 1931, when it opened in 1935. But the goat logo is really seriously too much. First of all, where it's from. Koln. That's Cologne. It's got the Nazi colors, of course, and those are Cologne's colors. You know, those are the color of Cologne city. And the two pillars in the middle, the twin towers. They show it in the Cone Rewe soccer promotion video. You know, the guy goes into Cologne Cathedral to pray. And he lights a candle with the goat on it. extremely occult. This is basically where the Brotherhood of Saturn come from. One of the most occult Masonic fraternities in the world. And the Masons built that cathedral. You know, they say as much in their documentaries about how that cathedral was built. The Cologne is HQ for the Masonic stonemasons of the 12th century, who established themselves here so they could build this mega church. This church took over 500 years to build. It was finished in the 1800s. The building commenced on, believe it or not, in the year 1284. There's your Hoover Dam again. With the spread of Christianity throughout Germany and the requirement for Roman bishops to raise cathedrals, the Masonic colleges in Germany thrived. In 1250, the first Grand Lodge of Freemasons was formed in the city of Cologne, Germany. The Grand Lodge was formed as part of the immense undertaking to erect the Cathedral of Cologne. So you can imagine all the world history shaping events which must have emanated out of this cathedral. The Nazis, and especially their Jesuit warlord Hitler, seem to have had a distinct affinity for these twin towers. It is said that somewhere in the bowels of this stone whale lies a crypt entombing the three wise men, or magi, who followed the Bethlehem star and heralded the birth of Christ. And as this documentary states, this holy behemoth was built by a prominent master builder of the time, which, if you know anything about Freemasonry and its roots, you will know that the master builders are linked to the Knights Templar, who only a couple of centuries before the first cornerstone was laid in 1322 for the nave or choir in this Cologne Dam, as they call it in German. We're digging under the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem for lost secrets and treasures. They were successful, obviously, at least concerning the secret wisdom, because not long after that, some of the tallest cathedrals in Europe were erected, and always by their Templar predecessors, the Masons, who employed the new technique of flying buttresses for the revolutionary novel mode of Gothic architecture, which was subsequently to sweep Europe at that time. These twin steeples actually held the record for the tallest in the world until Gustav Eiffel took the idea of flying buttresses and applied it to steel as opposed to stone, ushering in the era of the skyscraper, or cathedrals of commerce as they came to be called in New York City and Chicago. When it comes to the town of Cologne, these twin steeples were not the only record set for height. The other milestone just happens to be one of the main other tourist attractions in Cologne. It seems fairly nondescript and ordinary by degrees, other than the name of it. At any rate, it did retain the title of tallest building for a short time as Europe's first skyscraper. Some of you are probably wondering what all this has to do with the Hoover Dam, because I'm not even sure. It's just all that goat and twin tower, twin projection seems a little over the top to me. Besides, some of us know that the elites who run the show in this lifelong, scariest movie ever have been worshipping the goat for a very long time. And since Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn in the great gig in the sky up there, anywhere a lowly billy goat goes, Kronos is sure to follow, or be there waiting, or maybe both, seeing how Saturn controls time. In occult circles, when it comes to the goat and Saturn, you can't have one without the other, and so it is with this German city by the Rhine, apparently. As the Hansa Hochhaus, which means the high rise, most people even in Cologne just call it the Saturn building for obvious reasons, lies not only in view of the Cone Dome, but is built alongside a railway track, which could be construed as a bit occultist.
What the hell are you doing?
Especially when one studies Bollywood movies as much as I do.
You're gonna wanna watch this?
I was just going to avoid this track of thinking to elaborate on how these two occult edifices just happen to be physically linked by a railroad, but since we're on the subject of the god of time and all, well, 3 movies come to mind when combining, say, time travel with the railroad. And that would be The Source Code, Super 8, and of course, the third part of Back to the Future. In all 3 of these movies, the train symbolizes the snake or serpent, and the track itself represents the river or the sine wave. If you think I'm groping in a pitch black room here, just ask yourself why Doc Brown from Back to the Future named his dog Einstein, and the whole railroad serpent connection will hit you over the head like the proverbial sledgehammer. When Albert presented his groundbreaking farce known as E=mc², he had to explain the whole complicated quackery to the average cowpoke by referring to a popular thought experiment at the time which basically stated that if a person standing on a stationary platform witnessed a gun being fired from a speeding train, as opposed to someone else witnessing the same event on board that speeding train, then both witnesses would see the flash from the gun at a relative time in relation to their two vantage points occupying different spaces in time. This analogy was used to say that the faster one moves through time and space, the slower time passes for the point he left behind. This part is interesting, but probably nothing more, so I'll just let my mind's eye wander for a moment. I was just a bit puzzled by the unsightly juxtaposition from the city planners during the blueprint phase of this project back in the 1850s. There must have been an uproar in the community when Vaux learned that Cologne Botanical Gardens would have to be mowed down to make way for this unsightly web of tracks, right next to one of the seven wonders of Europe at that time. It must have been an oversight, or something they just couldn't avoid. Or perhaps the best explanation is the most empirical, being that the devil made them do it. Anyways, the whole setup here with all those tracks down there right next to the two pagan temples peering at each other through the cityscape in the midst of all that ugly history not so long ago seems really creepy to me. There is no doubt in my mind that this place is on a vortex point of the planet where ley lines meet, similar to that twisted web of tracks intersecting willy-nilly to and from the cathedral bridge which crosses the Rhine into Cologne's other half. There has been a lot of pain and hardship here as the place was all but systematically firebombed out of existence by the Allies back in 1944, where these two temples were practically the only structures left standing for hectares around. Even from where I'm sitting on this big blue ball of ours, the sadness is palpable. I'm sure the Templars accrued more than just architectural secret wisdom, but more than that, found out how to channel human energy, good or bad, through their Gothic monuments, not unlike the way a radio gets its signal from an antenna. What you are probably looking at is a massive, high-tech, medieval tuning fork designed to channel Earth's vortex energy through first the stone whale with its incredible acoustics, which amplify those vibrations up through the roof with its hundreds of spires that scrape the sky and transmit all that energy to the stars somewhere. Much of this secret esoteric technology is still being used in our modern buildings, and particularly at the Hoover Dam. Only that structure also generates electricity, which is the power that drives the universe, so you can imagine how far our master builders have come since the flying buttress. More on that later, but for now, let us just ponder for a moment back to the bad old days of the Second World War. The top brass of the Nazis would have had a great vantage point atop what was then called the theater building, with its eagle's nest, designed from the outset as a watchtower to monitor Cologne's bustling freight train activity back in the roaring 20s. But by the time the Nazis came into being, a much more sinister purpose for this watchtower must have been put to good use during and after the Second World War. Looking down to monitor through their binoculars the comings and goings at one of Europe's busiest train depots during the height of their famous death camps and Final Solution. Not sure if this was one of them, but I do know that the victims came through Rhineland towns such as Cologne in droves on the way to Czechoslovakia. I can't be 100% convinced that any of this scenario I'm about to posit has anything whatever to do with the twin projections of the Hoover Dam, but I am sure that the dam itself is a very important spot for the Dark Lords who rule our existence. And so is Cologne, Germany, obviously. So there must be some past horror that went on here that is about to be revisited on the United States, because the US has a debt to pay which Germany is about to collect in blood. So let's investigate a little the real Holocaust of the Second World War. Even after the war, I suspect that this place was even busier as the Jewish question was switched up for the logistical frightmare of what to do with over 1 million German POWs, which were then being held at far-flung camps scattered all over Europe. That is until the Supreme Commander of Allied Forces, Ike Eisenhower, took charge of the situation, barking out orders like a rabid dog and killing any conscionable other American soldier, or general for that matter, who might have objected to the Supreme Commandant's barbarous final solution for how to dispense with what was left of the German army. While the Nazis took the trouble to at least feed, clothe, and house their death camp workers, old Ike spared any expense whatsoever and corralled his unfortunate POWs, men, women, and children, into an open-air slaughterhouse hellhole infamously known as Rhineland. This wretched mass of pain and suffering must have been able to see the twin steeples from where they were being systematically starved to death on the banks of the Rhine. Poetically speaking, in relation to the Hoover Dam, the Rhine meadows were a kind of reservoir of wretched human suffering, waiting to die a slow death within an unspoken holocaust or lake of fire, hemmed in by a wall of Allied propaganda and lies. Ironically, the reservoir at the Hoover Dam just happens to be named after the chief of the agency known as the Bureau of Reclamation, one Elwood Mead. And if we look up the etymology for the word mead, we get wine and honey, which would in any good poem symbolize the beehive, procreation, abundance, regeneration, fertility, and the wine, of course, represents blood. So the Rhine Meadows is the figurative lake, if we are to believe the stories of Ike Eisenhower's notorious hatred for Germans and his true Zionist role as the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe, presiding over what was then indeed the greatest genocide since the birth of Christianity in terms of the deliberate, wholesale, murderous firebombing campaign, which was to rein in goodwill and peace to all men, except of course for Germans. Tragically ending with the Rhineland death camps, which were to be the epilogue to the greatest lie ever sold and the mightiest river of blood ever scrolled. It's ironic how the Hoover Dam tames the Colorado River, which in Spanish translates to color red O. Like I said, with the railroad symbolizing the river, it becomes true poetry in motion as these two twin rivers on opposite sides of the earth are both fed from mountain water, the Rocky Mountains here and the Swiss Alps there, and as fate would have it, the sham or hoax that was the Second World War was orchestrated by Zion, and the River Rhine just happens to originate near Basel, Switzerland, where the first Jewish World Zionist Congress was held in 1897. I don't say that this proves anything, but it is ironic when we consider how much Zion needed to see that Germany would never rise from the ashes of war again and would remain on her knees for the rest of history. And well, my friends, they have always had even more contempt for the United States and have been working diligently since its inception to undermine her from within. So you see, the symbol of the Twin Towers projected onto the Hoover Dam runs deep here. The name mead is actually the root word for meadow, and is thought to be the first alcoholic beverage ever in the human experience. So you can well imagine the many archaic poems and songs which were written about this nectar of the gods, as the ancient Greeks called it. I'll touch on the symbology of mead in a later edition to Secrets of the Hoover Dam, but for now we can catch a glimpse into the sordid humor of the elites who felt behooved to beam this largest projection ever of a goat mounting twin steeples onto the Hoover Dam. Yeah, just to show you that I'm not projecting, with the connection with Saturn and this Cologne Dam and the goat projection on the Hoover Dam, Capricorn. Right here in the square right in front of the Cologne Dam here, or the Cologne Cathedral. You see the symbolism here. See you have the papal beehive right here. Very ornate entrance to the massive cathedral, Twin Towers. So here you have the Hauptbahnhof, which is the train station, which of course is linked to that Saturn building I was talking about. But lo and behold, look, see on this building here, you have Saturn. So they have their offices in this building, and Saturn is proudly splayed out here, and somewhere over here the trees are now in the way. But there's two signs that proudly say Saturn right there, and I'm sure it isn't an accident. It isn't just because of that company just happened to rent offices in that building. No, it's very symbolic. This cathedral here is steeped in Saturn. Right in front on one of these stained glass windows, right in front, actually.
One of the largest synagogues.
You can see it from inside. It is is stained glass relief of none other than Saturn. They even have a stained glass relief of the goat in there. And the whole thing looks like the beast from the distance with two horns, It's like unbelievable symbolism with this it's practically a 900-year-old building. I mean, it was only in the 1800s that they actually got to building the two mammoth twin towers. Most of the rest of the cathedral stood for 800 years without this piece on them. And as you see too, they have the same fake, bizarre clouds that are so popular in the world today, above all of our cities. So I guess that's the first installment of Secrets of the Hoover Dam. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave your comments, let me know what you think. If I'm totally insane, crazy. I don't think so. I think I see other things a little bit. We all have our different ways of looking at things and our gifts, and I can see the roots below the tree. And I'm just showing you what's below the tree here, what's below the story, what's encoded into that projection at the Hoover Dam, the twin projections. I'll be back with another installation of Secrets of the Hoover Dam soon. Until then, I bid you guys adieu. Please don't neglect to thumbs up the video and share it. Took a lot of work to make it, so in a perfect world, I would imagine that is the least you can do to counter all the sense of entitlement here in this very imperfect world.